Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Friday, May 20th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Notre Dame game is in 107 days, the game against Michigan in 191 days. It has been quite a week in the college football world. We had a high-profile NIL spat in the SEC, some huge changes in the way immediately to both roster management and the way conference championships are determined. Boy, there is a lot to talk about today. My guest today is Kevin Noon. He's the host of the Big Me Kickoff podcast. I'm guessing he's going to have a few things to say about this crazy week of news. Kevin, thanks for being here.
Absolutely, anytime.
So I guess let's start with the two big changes that the NCAA Division I Council approved this week, one of which has already led to a big change for one of the Power 5 conferences. The first one is that leagues with 12 or more members no longer need to split into divisions in order to hold a conference championship game. So that came out, and about 3 seconds later, the Pac-12 said, all right, we're ditching divisions, and we're going to have just the top two teams in the conference and by winning percentage play for the Pac-12 title. That's going into effect this year. No more South versus North in the Pac-12 championship game, effective immediately. The AP is reporting the ACC could soon follow suit, and the Big Ten and the SEC are, this is a direct quote from the AP report, also considering future schedule models and whether to stick with the divisions. That is the end of the quote. Kevin, is this something you'd like to see the Big Ten shift to?
You know, I think so. They haven't been able to do a good job of creating divisions since they went to the division model. Obviously, Leaders and Legends was one-sided. East versus West is one-sided. The problem is you can't keep adjusting divisions on a every 5-year basis, because the thought is that you don't know where the power is going to be. Well, for the foreseeable future, and probably forever under the current configuration, the East is always going to be stronger than the West, just because of where the population is, where the football talent comes from, just the names on the front of the jerseys in the East versus on the West. I did a show a month ago or so with somebody who played at Iowa, who had, some strong opinions about, what happens in terms of the regular season. But my point was, once you get to Indianapolis, it's very one-sided in how it is. There certainly are some pitfalls by going to divisionless play. You do have the chance of a immediate rematch if Ohio State and Michigan are there at the end. But we've seen rematches happen in the conference championship game, just not on back-to-back weeks. I think it's the right decision. I think it will end up benefiting the conference the most. It will end up creating the most compelling game. We certainly have seen times where there's been a 12-0 or 11-1, 11-1 team going against an 8-4 team. It doesn't necessarily help you in the day and age of the college football playoff and leaving that last meaningful data point. Again, I can see some downsides to it, but I'm for uniformity, and the Pac-12 has already jumped. The ACC, as you said, is on the precipice, and then other conferences could move as well. I think everybody should be playing the same amount of league games, and I think everybody should have the same sort of postseason structure.
We didn't mention the Big 12 there. The reason we didn't mention the Big 12 is because the Big 12 already does it this way. They only had 10 members. They will have 10 members until Cincinnati and all those guys join the conference later, and Texas and Oklahoma leave. But, right now, as of the end of 2021 season, they had 10 members. So they were not required to do a divisional setup to have a conference championship game. They just did 1 versus 2 in the conference standings. That's how it's going to be potentially for everyone moving forward. As you said, there's still people kind of making that decision. One of the other sort of fall off impacts of getting rid of divisions is now you're probably changing how you do your scheduling. Right now, the Big Ten does, you play your 6 other teams in division, and then you play 3 teams from the other division every year. That gets you to 9. Now there's a kind of a question, okay, how are they going to do it? And one of the methods that seems most likely is sort of a pod scheduling, where you have maybe 3 teams that are protected rivals that you play every year. So for Ohio State, it's Michigan, maybe Penn State, and you might think Michigan State, but then you get into some other, okay, Rutgers has to play 3 teams too, and Rutgers is going to want to play Penn State, and Rutgers is going to want to play so Maryland, and Maryland's going to want to play Penn State. So you're not necessarily going to get exactly the 3 teams you want, but it's probably safe to say Ohio State gets Michigan and Penn State, and then someone else, whether it's Rutgers or Maryland or someone else. But that then, it seems like there's some positives to that, where you're going to start playing all the other teams in the Big Ten, all the Big Ten West teams that you used to see maybe once every 5 or 6 years. Now you're seeing them potentially a lot more often than that.
Well, you're going to go from the inequity of the divisions to the inequity of the pods. If you're Ohio State and you get Michigan and Penn State and then whoever, in poker terms, we call that a blank, as you're trying to put your hand together, that's going to be different than a team that has one traditional power and two blanks. So you're going to still have people complaining about that. I mean, it is going to give you the opportunity to play more teams more often because of how it's going to work in terms of which pods you're going to draw in terms of, okay, in these 2 years, you're going to do home and aways against pods A and B. But, again, another question is going to be, we still have conferences that play 9 league games. We still have conferences that play 8 league games. This pod model doesn't necessarily, are you going to do 3? Are you going to do 3 teams that are in your pod and then 5? Are you going to play one whole pod and then 2/3 of a pod? So, there's a lot of math, a lot of moving around, moving parts that are going to be in play. And, this all could end up being an exercise in futility if we sit there and we see Division One have this fracture. I mean, whether or not it's kind of the Gene Smith plan of where the college football playoff kind of takes over, governance of college football, or if we see a true fracture of where the haves and the have-nots and D1A split. I think that we're going to be doing a lot of groundwork that isn't necessarily going to bear fruit for what college football is going to look like in 10 years. But I think that some of these changes that are in play are necessary.
Yeah, and one of the other changes in play is a 2-year waiver to let programs sign more than 25 players in a recruiting class. That passed this week as well. The idea there is to let teams with big roster holes from COVID or the portal catch up so they're not playing way shorthanded this year. Now, this annual scholarship total of 85 will still be in effect. So this is not likely to make a huge difference for Ohio State, for example, because they're kind of right around the 85 limit. But a lot of times, coaching, schools where there's been a coaching transition, you see a ton of outflow. Charlie Weiss, rather famously, when he left Kansas, left David Beatty with, I think, 43 players for his first spring practice. That is not a problem. That is not a problem you could fix very quickly if you were only able to bring in 25 guys from high school every year. I guess the question to me is, there are ways in which this seems like this might be a very good thing for players in terms of you potentially could bring in, have more high school seniors getting scholarships to play FBS football. That seems like a very obviously good thing. But then you potentially also, if teams can bring in new, more than 25 players, you might have a little more roster churn at the back end of your roster and have more people getting booted and, or gently escorted to the door, shall we say, in order to, make room for the next year's shiny new recruits. I guess, is this ultimately to you a good thing or a bad thing for players? It's a good thing for coaches in terms of being able to manage the rosters and fill the rosters and keep everything filled up. And it's a good thing from a player safety perspective in terms of the not being shorthanded. But, is this a good thing in terms of opportunities for players or not?
Kind of gone back and forth. You told me in the pre-show interview what we were going to talk about, and I've changed my mind on this about 6 times as I'm put myself on autopilot as I really started to churn on the thing that I hadn't given a lot of thought to. I don't know if it's great in terms of if everybody's going to be capped at 85, and there's been talk of trying to make it to where you have to be at 85 at all times as opposed to by XYZ date. I don't know where that is in terms of D1 Council or the Oversight Committee or whoever is going to be making that decision. We see a lot of programs that are recruiting heavily out of the portal. This certainly is going to supply a lot of kids for the portal, but we're going to see a lot of kids that are going to get stuck in the portal and have nowhere to exit to. A Justin Fields, a Caleb Williams, Jordan Addison. Those guys don't have anything to worry about, but you're going to have a lot of guys that are buried on a depth chart somewhere who are going to end up in the portal. And they're going to find out that the grass isn't greener. But the truth of the matter is that they've been kindly shown that there's a big wide world out there for them, just not here. So if you're constantly kind of running through that churn and saying, "Oh, we're going to let you go over 25 for that, for your signing class," I mean, I think that's going to be bad for players who are a year, 2 years into a system and don't have anywhere to go. I don't think we're going to necessarily see a situation where there are going to be more kids signed out of high school, because I think there's a very defined number of kids that are truly Division One FBS caliber. Just because you do that, I don't think we're going to suddenly see more kids that are Division One FBS caliber. I do think that it does a good thing for programs that get gutted by the portal, whether it be through a coaching change or something artificial like that that creates a blip on the radar. Um, but I don't know truly who this necessarily benefits the greatest at this point. I mean, it certainly makes the roster management numbers easier to come together, but I don't know if this is going to be a great thing for any player, because it's not going to affect the top end player because they were fine anyway. I don't even know if it's going to affect the mid tier player. I just think it's going to be some of these players that are maybe flyers or on the edge or at programs that are kind of at the bottom of FBS, that are going to find themselves kind of pushed through. And we see all these things and say, well, this is certainly going to make football better, and then it does absolutely the opposite. So um until until I find out that that's not a tunnel painted on the side of that big rock wall, I'm not necessarily trusting any move.
Yes, the Acme scholarship limit machine is going to get fired up, and I'm sure it's going to go great. Yeah, that's there. You can kind of talk yourself in circles on that one, because it's good for a while potentially, but then it could cause problems down the line for people potentially. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about there. There is also, oh boy, let's talk about our last topic for this morning. I just want to at least mention a little bit about that Nick Saban Jimbo Fisher situation this week. Tony and Kevin and I did a live episode of Buckeye Weekly on Thursday afternoon for like an hour 20 talking about this. So that's why we didn't lead the show with this, because if you watch that, you've kind of already heard our thoughts on this a little bit. But in case you have been living a blessed enough life to not be on Twitter, on Wednesday evening in Birmingham, Nick Saban said, quote, "A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. We didn't buy one player. But I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future, because more and more people are doing it." And so that's pretty spicy. And then on Thursday, Texas A&M head coach Jimbo Fisher held one of the most remarkable press conferences I can remember to respond. He flatly denied that any rules were broken. And among many, many, many other real spicy quotes, he said, quote, "Some people think they're God. Go into how God did his deal. You may find out about a lot of things you don't want to know. We build him up to be the czar of football. Go dig into his past or anybody that's ever coached with him. You can find out anything you want to, what he does and how he does it. It's despicable. It really is." Kevin, at the rate things are going, I'm sure sometime between now and when this show actually goes live, someone will have been accused of kidnapping the Lindbergh baby or whatever. But man, this one feels like it went from 0 to 60 in record time.
Yeah, if you want to do a news dump, do your news dump right about now, because this is going to be the main topic in terms of sports. Sorry, NHL playoffs. Sorry, NBA playoffs. This is what people are going to want to talk about. It was 9 minutes plus of one of the angriest press conferences that I've ever seen. Probably even more angry than when the Temple basketball coach, wanted to choke out his opposing
John
coach.
Chaney wanted to choke out John Calipari, if I remember correctly.
Exactly, exactly. This was more uncomfortable, yet strangely gratifying just watching it. And I don't know what side most people are going to fall on. I mean, I think there certainly have been the whispers that, well, it's not even whispers, the loud talking that Alabama's got to be doing something a little less than stand up over there. And there's certainly been a lot of loud talking that A&M, who over the previous 4 years had signed a grand total of 4 5-star kids out of high school, signed 7 and put together statistically the greatest signing class in recruiting ranking history. Um, It'll be interesting to see how, this he said goes if, if any corroborating witnesses start to speak up, or if everybody's like, this is between you guys, you handle this, I'm out. There have been some players that, on one side or the other, or even in the middle, that have been popping off a little on social media. But it does once again raise the question of where NIL is, and the thing that's not lost on me is that Nick Saban's comments took place at a booster meal, $5,000 a plate type of situation, and kind of seemed like you guys need to step up and start throwing a little bit more money out there. But Nick Saban knows what he's doing. He doesn't say things accidentally, regardless of any backtracking that may happen. I doubt it's going to happen. He certainly put a message out there, and it was received loud and clear. And Jimbo Fisher did not wait long to come back out with a presser, speaking at 11 Eastern the following morning. I think that's about the time that they were able to get something set up and get invitations out to the media for a very brief yet pointed dissertation.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see where this goes right now. You've just had Lane Kiffin tweeting various versions of just eating popcorn and watching kind of memes. Mike Leach texted a Mississippi State beat writer saying, quote, "I'm just watching it unfold. The current state of NIL and the portal is unsustainable, though." And it is going to be fascinating to see where this one goes next. It does feel like this is one of those things where this is the stuff that has sort of been below the surface a little bit in the sport for quite a while. I'm sure you have not, you listener are probably not unfamiliar with the concept of a bagman and all of that. That is not new. That is not tied to NIL. It's just happening maybe in a little bit of a different way and a little bit more openly now. And it's being talked about a lot more openly now by folks at the very top of the sport. It is going to be real interesting to see where this goes from here. We had a lot to talk about around that story, Tony Gerdeman. As I mentioned, Tony Gerdeman, Kevin, and I did a very special live episode of Buckeye Weekly on Thursday afternoon to go through all of that. You can find that whole conversation. It was like an hour and 20 minutes. That's on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop, or on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this show on. Just search Buckeye Weekly or Buckeye Scoop to find that and all of our other great shows. One of those great shows is the Big Me Kickoff. Kevin does that. I'm going to guess he will have an episode coming out relatively soon. There's a little bit to talk about right now in the college football world. So yeah, you'll have that. Alex Gleitman just dropped a new episode of his Around the Oval podcast. Bill Green and Mark Givler do the Gives in the Bank podcast. You can find them all by searching Buckeye Scoop wherever you're listening to this. You can subscribe right there so you never miss an episode, and also give us a 5-star rating and review, which will help other folks find those shows as well. And as I constantly forget to tell you, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up. That will help other folks find these episodes on YouTube as well, which makes our lives a little better and makes us do even more content, which then theoretically makes your life a little bit better too. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. We will talk to you on Monday.